Hello, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the Bechdel test, which is a test used by film critics and critics of works of fiction to determine how much women are represented in the work. It's often used in the film industry, which is what we're going to kind of focus on in this video, but it can also be easily applied to works of written fiction or other media, basically. So the Bechdel test is used in a lot of things. We'll just be focusing on film today because that's what it's used for the most, I think. So we'll get started learning about what the Bechdel test is and then see some examples. So what exactly is this test? Well, the Bechdel test is a measurement of the representation of women in fiction. It asks whether a work features at least two women who talk to each other about something other than a man. Now, it would be it's kind of surprising, but that doesn't actually happen that often. Only about 50% of the films released nowadays actually pass the Bechdel test. So it's not as common as you would think. Occasionally, another requirement is added that the women have to be named. So there can't just be like a random woman that someone meets in like a bar or something and you never learn their name, but they have a conversation about something other than a man. That doesn't count. It has to be a named character. It can't be just a filler. This test isn't completely indicative of female representation because this conversation could happen, right, where two women talk about something other than a man, but then they're treated like trash the rest of the film, right? So it's not like perfect, but it definitely indicates the active presence of women in the field of film and fiction. So, right, unlike like most tests, right, it's not perfect, but it's definitely a step in the right direction. So who is Bechdel? Well, Alison Bechdel is an American cartoonist, and she's the author who wrote the graphic memoir Fun Home, very popular. The Bechdel test originated from her original comic strip, Dykes to Watch Out For. It kind of came out of that. It was part of the comic. And her novel Fun Home was adapted into a musical and then won a Tony Award in 2015 for Best Musical. So very successful cartoonist, fiction writer, all of that. So Alison Bechdel is the bomb, basically. And if you haven't seen any of her work, you should definitely check it out because it's pretty great. So let's talk about what movies pass the Bechdel test and which don't pass. And so to kind of give you an example, maybe people will be more familiar with, we've got Marvel movies here. Movies that pass the Bechdel test, movies like Black Widow or even Thor actually was kind of surprising, but Thor also passes the Bechdel test. There are Darcy and Jane talk about things that are not men several times in that film. So they pass the Bechdel test. Movies that don't pass, Captain America Civil War, all of the women in those movies do not have conversations about things other than, that aren't about men, really. So this movie does not. So you can kind of see that. If you watch these two movies, you could see the difference between the two and kind of see why one passes and one doesn't. So why do we need this test? Why do we need this? I think me saying that only about 50% of films actually pass it is kind of a reason why. But in case you need more reasons that we need it, here's a few more. The Bechdel test is really needed to gauge whether women are represented in film and media, especially since it's an industry that's often kind of left women out or only use them to support male characters. It's also become an important topic of conversation around the major Hollywood films, the big blockbusters, especially with the rise of the Me Too movement in the 2010s. It's like, if you're going to put this much money into a film, why can't you put meaningful female characters in them, right? It's not that hard to do. And generally, good female representation is lacking in movies. So the Bechdel test is kind of a good first step in trying to hold Hollywood and society accountable. If this movie doesn't pass the Bechdel test, should we really support it anymore? If people aren't willing to put in the time to put in a real character that's a woman who has some sort of actual arc or some sort of reason to exist other than to support this man, why is the character even there? Are there other tests out there that are kind of similar? Yes, there are plenty of them. We're going to go over a few of them here because some of them are actually kind of funny, and others are just important. The first one is the Mako Mori test, which asks, does a female character has a narrative arc that does not support a man? This one came because of the Pacific Rim in the 2010s. Mako Mori is one of the characters, and her entire existence is just to support that main character who's a man. So, womp. Okay, the sexy lamp test is, can you replace a female character with a sexy lamp and it doesn't affect the story? There's a lot of movies you can do that with, actually, which is kind of sad. The Sphinx test measures how stereotypical women character is perceived in a movie. And the Johansson analysis measures female representation with a point scale. So that one's a little bit more complex and advanced than the Bechdel test. The rest of these here are for other things that aren't women, like the Vito Russo test, which does a film contain a character that is identifiably LGBTQ and doesn't solely define by their sexuality, which is harder to find than you'd think. People of color test, do two ethnic minorities talk to each other for more than 5 minutes about something other than race? Also harder to find than you'd think. And then there's the Duvernay test. Do African American characters have fully realized lives, or are they just the scenery for a white story? Also harder to find than you'd think. So these are all different ways that we are trying to hold Hollywood and also just writers and creative people in general accountable for not making these different groups accessible in media, whether they be women, people of color, LGBTQ people, all those things, right? There needs to be real people with those sorts of traits available in the media for others. Thank you for watching this quick video about the Bechdel test, and I hope it makes you think a little bit more about which movies you go to see and which movies you don't. I'm not saying you shouldn't go see movies that don't pass the Bechdel test, because some of them are really awesome, and that's fine. But there should also be more movies that do. So it's definitely something to kind of think about when you're going to your theaters next. If you even go to theaters now, COVID and whatnot. What movie you stream next. Sure. Okay. So thank you guys for watching. Go ahead and subscribe, like, ring the bell, and check out the channel. We've got lots of different things available for your perusal. So I hope you enjoy, and we'll see you next time. Bye.